Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and today my astrology star sister Sue Minahan is joining me. Hi, Sue. Welcome.
Hello, Liz. Hi.
It's good to have you back.
I know we've been looking forward to this particular episode, so I'm excited.
And we're talking about the dwarf planets in relationship to summer solstice. And Sue is an evolutionary astrologer, consultant, writer, speaker, Dwarf Planet University graduate, and host and founder of talkcosmos.com, and her website is talkcosmos.com. And I'm an astrologer, author, intuitive and numerologist, also a graduate of the Dwarf Planet University, and certified relationship astrologer. And my website is alightpath.com. And we both enjoy hearing from our audience. So, the dwarf planets, we have a diagram here. The dwarf planets, all of them except Ceres, are in the Kuiper Belt. So it shows the planets in the center, and then where it's black and white, it shows where the dwarf planets are.
There's
And
thousands there, aren't there? It's
yes,
incredible.
and they're
And
everything beyond Neptune.
well, I'm thinking of yes, and I don't know if on this slide or the next one, there's many names for it. Yes, I think this is where it is. They're called dwarf planets, planetoids, Plutinos, because Pluto is changed from his status into a dwarf planet, which really empowers a lot in the sense that now there's this tribe, you could almost say, of dwarf planets, all transformational or trans-Neptunian, just as you said, TNO, beyond Neptune.
And dwarf planets are small planetary objects orbiting around the sun. And on our other shows, we've gone into it a little more detailed. So if you want more detailed, you can go back and see a previous show that Sue and I have done on the dwarf planets. So we're going to start with dwarf planet Haumea. She transmutes and is a rebirth path. And she's the fastest rotation at 4 hours, egg shaped, and the orbit is 284 years and will be in Scorpio since November of 2022 until December of 2049. Haumea is the third dwarf planet after Pluto on Makemake. And then, Sue, will you tell us about the Hawaiian creation and fertility goddess, please?
Truly, she gives birth through every part of her body, the arms, legs, everything. It's a total transformation and propagation for fertility and life creation. However, the Pele, the goddess of the volcano, especially here on the big island of Hawaii, that happens to be erupting since December periodically and at great heights, is the only one that was naturally birthed through the womb and the vagina and that for Pele. And of course, birth can be like Pele, a tumultuous experience, not just the pains of the deliverer. And that really is what it is, but the whole birth process, it's an involved experience.
Absolutely. And then the astrology of Haumea is from the Dwarf Planet University by Alan Clay, the founder and teacher, and Melissa Billington is a teacher also at the Dwarf Planet University. It's an excellent book on Haumea. And then the dwarf planet Pluto, and Pluto will be in Aquarius for 20 years. So some of the archetypal symbology with that is around groups, community, and network. And I'll let Sue share the rest.
Yeah, that's really an important factor, what you're saying there, Liz, because in Aquarius, it's where the soul wants to elevate the experience for all, for the consciousness of the collective, which is no easy task. And in that sense, it is a bit not detached, but objective, very objective in its attitude, which the downside can be a bit of elitism in Aquarius, because who is your community? At best, it can be the broad scope of people. And of course, with Pluto, it's always about power. What resources do you have that you're exchanging with somebody else or any source? And is it really benefiting both sides? So there's this consistent process of birth and rebirth, death and life. And interestingly, well, since we brought up Haumea on your organized slides here, which are very good, with Pluto, it's a conjunction for many, many years, for many of us, for maybe 60 years. I can't quite recall, but a long extended time that they're traveling within a conjunction, sometimes a wider conjunction and a more narrow conjunction, but particularly those born, I think about in the late 60s, have it quite conjunct. Whereas I was, 10 years early, no, maybe the middle 60s. At any rate, even up in all the 60s onward. And that's where the death process that perhaps Pluto is significant in just purging and ending something. Haumea has that rebirth emphasis.
Well, and Pluto, in a certain sense, also does, because it's the death and regeneration. So through that regeneration, it's building something up again.
Well, we think of it that way, Liz, but Alan came up with the fact his is very conjunct. And all of us, I think of it that way too, but perhaps it's not because of Pluto. Pluto is like, over, you're done. You're down there in Hades. You're not coming back again. There's a new life and everything else in mythology, but Haumea is, no, we're going to rebirth. It's like the magma, it's the lava coming out of the earth, coming back, or the seeds, the regeneration. So, I mean, it's not to be, and I don't mean to be quibbling, but I'm just thinking that because of that intense sextile that's lasted for 50 whatever years, and it's part of our natal heritage, we tend to consider that as part and parcel, which I have too. So it was an eye-opener. But I guess we'll find out. But it has a lot to do about shadows.
Yes. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, now we're going to go to dwarf planet Sedna. The destiny of the soul path has an extreme elliptical orbit. When Eris, or when Sedna is in Gemini, it's for 44 years, versus when it's in Sagittarius, it's for 1,500 years. So the Gemini transit began June of 2023 and will last until 2067. Very similar in size to Pluto, furthest out in the Kuiper Belt at this time, discovered in November of 2003, because I keep discovering more and more, and I think they just discovered one last week. So I'm excited to see what that's all going to be about. So anyway, I'll let you tell about awakening our consciousness and soul consciousness.
Sedna truly opens a whole nother vista of the dwarfs. It's fascinating that there are ones beyond, because for a long time it was considered to be the limit and the soul destiny. And that is really, as my experience, we've both taken classes, and those classes involve looking at your own charts. And one realizes it's a large spectrum. It's where the soul really is driving the individual towards a lifestyle choices that will allow that soul to blossom and be rediscovered in their goddess totality. It's not an easy choice, because in the mythology, she, long story short, had engaged ideas that weren't of her own. And it was represented by a bird king. Bird is spirit and thought, and asked for her father to help her from this island, who represents our tradition, or what we've engaged as far as our conditioning thought. And through a storm by those old thoughts, the father threw her overboard and even chopped her fingers off, which is a terrible melodrama story, yet it really only is to illustrate the necessity to let go of what you've been hanging on to that is in no way serving. So it's a long spectrum. It's not an easy, this was 1982, even a date. It's a whole phase. And so through that, it is transcendence in its true form.
Well, and it reminds me of being, standing within your own power and being true to yourself. So that reminds me of that. So I thought
It's the whole message. Yes, you're absolutely right. But our minds and egos and hearts in this particular energy of Sedna, which is the goddess, in the ocean, and there's other mythologies around the world that all look at the ocean and the feminine to being of a nurturing, life-giving source. It takes a lot of doing. It's not easy letting go of attachments. It's a process.
Exactly. So we're going to move on to dwarf planet Eris, Greek goddess of discord and strife, inclusion versus exclusion, discovered January of 2005, a trans-Neptunian object with highly tilted and elliptical orbit of 561.38 years, extending into the Kuiper Belt. Most massive and second largest known dwarf planet in the solar system. Her discovery sparked reconsideration of the definition of a planet, demoting Pluto to a dwarf planet.
Case in point, her mythology stood the test of time. Here she was, not invited to a wedding, and it wasn't just any wedding. You have to look into this. This is the wedding that the marriage produced Achilles, the greatest warrior. That then was involved with other factors of mythology and life. But the point is she asked a simple question: who's the fairest of you all? Of the three goddesses there, the Juno, of partnership, of love, and of wisdom, Athena. And of course, they quarreled. And from that all, there was a choice. And that choice, a mortal decided to take the wife of the Spartan king, Helen, who happened to also be an immortal, because she is one of the female twins of the Gemini twins that nobody really speaks about. She and her mortal sister Clemesta, very involved in one factor. And I know I get involved with details, but they're fascinating to consider. The truth of it is that it started this Trojan War, that Achilles, as the great warrior, would be a main factor. And here she has, in modern times, when astronomers realized, oh my goodness, what are we going to do with these extra planets that technology is finding out about? We can't just have 1,000,001 planets. They had to categorize. And so therefore being equal to Pluto. And so, yes, she transformed things just by being there.
Exactly.
Which upset all the astrologers, right? Oh, we do have Pluto it's taking a long time, I think, for astrologers to realize that Pluto really has tremendous power still. Just because it's demoted, small things come in good packages,
Well, and we spoke about the outer limits. At one time, Saturn was the outer limit of what we could visually see. Then we discovered Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. So those were the outer planets that, with telescopes developing, that we could observe. And so that's kind of when psychology started. And now with the dwarf planets, now it's, on a deeper subconscious level, I believe. So it's just expanding and expanding and expanding.
Good.
So,
well, we'll be excited to see this new one. You've got me excited now. No, it's very good. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, now we're going to visit Neptune. Neptune will be in Eris for 14 years. And I'll let Sue tell us about Neptune.
Neptune is, in one fashion, I think of what Rick Levine says. It is the vision, Jupiter is the vision that we can see. It's a visible planet. And Neptune is that vision way beyond. It's that, and as Alan Clay says, and other people could be saying this too, it just comes to mind, or maybe it's not Alan, it's actually vibrational astrology. It's that extraordinary vision that makes a magic in life. You know, what is surreal? What is beyond? Because it's imagination. It couldn't be illusion. Who's to say that your imagination? Mickey Mouse wasn't. Disney had a hard time selling Mickey Mouse, his first mouse, until he branded it Mickey Mouse, and now we know it's part of history. But the key word is no boundaries. It's akin to the ocean as we see it, and it's akin to the eternal cosmos that goes on beyond our consciousness.
The vastness.
Yeah, right.
And then we have Chiron. And Chiron has had several classifications as an asteroid, a centaur, a comet, and a minor planet. Orbits between Saturn and Uranus, and a full rotation around the sun is 50.39 years, discovered in 1977. And the archetype is the teacher, healer, shaman, tutor, guru, guide, foster parent. Best known as the wounded healer, associated with alternative therapies and holistic medicine, and helps us face our personal wounds and transform that pain and fear and suffering into healing and growth, and then being able to share it with others, how we've healed and grown, and to share that with others.
That is the key, isn't it? It really is. When you learn that your wounds, it seems so personal because you're unable to heal and how to work with them until we relate to others with it, then it expands that. And I love how all those, you don't need to go back, but the fact that it has so many roles, so many hats, it also illustrates the depth of what we consider our wound, how it can morph into so many capacities, but then be successful. And I suppose, are you going to talk about the mythology here? It was part horse and man. There's a rejection from both mother and, but his father was Saturn, unlike other centaurs, or Ixion. That's a whole nother dwarf planet that has to do about second chances and lawlessness.
Yeah, I just like to point out that Chiron had two wounds, not just one, because he's mostly known for being shot with a poisonous arrow. And I think it's important that rejected by his mother and abandoned by his father,
Yeah.
A lot of people can relate to that because they have similar experiences in their life. So that's what I like to make clear on that.
Yes, it's good to always bring that up because we look for those roles in life. And many times then that means that one needs to recreate it. He had Apollo, the sun, as his foster father. So truly had the gift of the light, you could say, just more an abstract way of understanding it.
Right. Okay, so we're looking at the summer solstice chart that occurred on June 21st at 2:42 a.m. Greenwich time, and on the 20th in the United States. And when the sun entered the sign of Cancer, and the summer solstice, of course, is for the northern hemisphere, and it would be a winter in the southern hemisphere. So we're going to look at the Sabian symbols. The Sabian symbols were channeled by spiritual medium Elsie Wheeler in 1925 with the assistance of Mark Edmund Jones. And they're phrases that present a symbolic image for each of the degrees. And we're going to look at Haumea is at 1 degree Scorpio, so we're going to round it up and look at 2 degrees Scorpio. A delicate bottle of perfume lies broken, releasing its fragrance. So do you have any comments about that? Because we know that Haumea is about birthing things.
It's fascinating Sabians, and you have great insights into Sabians. So this is definitely a conversation that I'm welcoming your input on, Liz. I think here, because you add so many good notes, and of course we've reviewed it, but it is just like that memory. That's what I'm thinking, because Scorpio is a water sign. It's deep, very deep. And our memories are what form our relationships. We have the ability to change them. But here, it's really a matter of I think surrendering means that we need to allow that possibility of using those feelings. It's not just I know myself lately, I have been experiencing this where through a conversation on my own, something will happen and I'll relate back to a memory, and suddenly I'm allowing it more time, and the whole experience, the thoughts, the patterns, the reasons, the feelings, it all is returning, which gives a whole new context to it. It gives life to it, and you can now see it for how it served in your life for whatever purpose, and how it's being helpful now or perhaps not.
Well, and it talks about the bottle being broken, so releasing that attachment to that bottle, and you can still enjoy the fragrance of the perfume. And we're talking about rebirth. So a few weeks ago, I was at the hardware store picking up something for my mom, and I walked by the plants that were needing some love and attention because they almost were dead. And I thought, well, I'm going to take a few of those home. And so I purchased a few, and I was surprised that I go, what am I smelling on my deck? Oh, that smells really good. And they have an aroma. And so now I get to not only enjoy pretty flowers, but the smell of them too. So, and the bottle's broken. So the key word is surrendered at the bottom. So just surrender to what is changing at this point, I would say.
Absolutely. That's just a classic example, especially with the flowers. How wonderful you nursed it along. I've had sudden changes. As I said, I was trying to remember how that might relate. Well, it did in a way. My refrigerator went out yesterday, very Uranian experience. And I ended up buying a little tiny refrigerator that was on sale because it had a slight dent in the back. And it reminded me of a refrigerator I had when I first came to Hawaii, because we lived in a studio then. And it was actually an upgrade because I had a freezer on the top instead of one of those little college things that just has the whole thing in it. And you're always having to knock down the ice. And I thought, well, in a sense, it's like we're not quite camping, but it is similar to when you're camping and you've got it's a whole nother throwback, but still we're enjoying this beautiful place. So it's
good.
Same idea. It's surrendering and remembering.
So Haumea is, here's the aspects that Haumea is making in the summer solstice chart. We have a T-square with Haumea opposite the moon, Chiron, and Eris, and squaring off to Pluto. So there's a little bit of tension there.
Oh, how potent. This is really dynamic. Many people have been talking about the solstice, which was several days ago. Yet, I know in a talk show I have, Linda Berry shows that the energies can persist throughout the whole summer season. This viewpoint with the dwarfs really, I think, demonstrates the potency of it, because we have two rebirths, as you were saying, planets, death, life cycles with Pluto, Haumea, which is wanting that rebirth out of us. That is not a simple story. It's not like changing, I don't like this sitcom on TV with Netflix, I'm going to go to something else. You're experiencing a lot of dynamics, especially, actually, you have 3 dwarf planets with Eris there that we've discussed, who says include everything to get the full picture, and maybe you're feeling very excluded in the process. It's hard, and it's emotional, along with our wounds that we're wanting to manifest. So the good story of this, the tall order is ante up, put on your bootstraps and forge forward, or forge into the depths, and know that there's help on the way, which there's other aspects. But really surrendering and getting involved with this is the only way. There's little else to do.
Right, I would agree. And, looking at the situation deeply of, okay, is this important? If it is, or what can I do to help change it? Or is it not even mine? And then, really almost like going into a meditation or just taking a time out, and then, okay, how can this process be healed? How can it be rebirthed? And the opposite of Pluto would be Leo. So looking at it from a heart-centered place, I think, would be very helpful. But adjustments do need to take place.
Leo, of what planet are you talking about, though? That would be Aquarius. The opposite of Leo.
The opposite of Pluto would be Leo. So I'm just saying.
Oh, yes. Okay, just to clarify.
Use that heart energy for that, because there's no planet there at this point, but just to help assist with that. And, people can be feeling Eris not treated correctly. And
it's not going to change overnight. It's not changing overnight. And this is something I'm just saying, I'm not presenting a doom factory. It's more calling the elephant's tail the elephant's tail. You've got the trunk, you've got the tail. There's so many factors here, but there is help on the way. And I think what you're bringing up with the mental thinking about it, because even though it's not exactly an aspect to Haumea, Mercury there is very closely square to Chiron and Eris. So it is a matter of, you're right, thinking about because it's all integrated, it's not isolated. So because
relate, it's not just me, it's just not you, it's like a global feeling, perhaps, and a global energy that we're working through to release what's not working. How can we make things more fair? How can we rebirth and change all this? So, but it's on a global level.
And that's exactly right, because Aquarius is that collective consciousness. So that T-square is extremely activating. Yes, all these thoughts. The sun with Jupiter trining I think works a lot with what you're saying about wanting to come up with new belief factors. But those belief factors are very interested in trying. It's a mix, because in Cancer, we want to protect and we want to nurture. And we have people that are very close to us. And that's part of the problem let's say the challenge involved is that T-square tension with Pluto, and as we were saying, with Haumea and Eris, Chiron, Moon, that are the emotional parts of it, that everybody has who they believe to be the most important, that their collective group is. It can be their country, it could be their family, could be their friends, whatever it is. But it's this whole dialogue of coming forth with working towards that belief system that wants to, but it's answering to the moon. So it is very involved with trying to figure that out.
Well, and Cancer is our family. It's our community, or friends that we feel like our family, or that are close to us, or that are people of like-minded, perhaps. And so, perhaps people are changing, maybe they're getting new family or new friends in new ways. And it's like, maybe I've been part of this group, but I just don't resonate with that as like I used to from 20 years ago. And that's okay.
Because it's rebirth. You're birthing. You're becoming. Yes, exactly.
Well, and I know a lot of people are relocating for different reasons, so it could just be finding a new community. Okay, then we have a sextile to Mars. Go ahead.
Sextile to Mars.
Haumea is sextile
Yes,
to
yes,
Mars.
yes, yes, we do. Yes, I was looking at the yod, but yes, that's really. Go ahead, I'm listening. You're directing.
Well, in Mars in Virgo is a little more analytical, makes a plan, um, is can be very diplomatic, and wants to organize. So, um, if you want to organize or get something off the ground, this is a really good time to do that. And I would say this is a really good time to rebirth a project, start a writing project, start
Mm,
any of those things that you want to do, or start something with people of like minded, perhaps. And then, as Sue
I
mentioned, we
like it.
a yod, and Saturn, Neptune are one handle, and the other is Uranus, and Sedna, and they're sextile and they're pointing to Haumea, so that's the focal point of that energy. And I know you wanted to talk about that yod, so go ahead, Sue.
Well, you do have more yods ahead. And because as I look at that, and you brought up Mars, there is a yod, and a yod is, okay, I know we've explained this before, but for those that perhaps are like, okay, what's all this language about? Yod in that pattern is one that natally was. This is again my teachings or learnings going to vibrational astrology. The transit is different than the natal. In the natal, it's an intense learning factor that's faded from birth until whenever in your life. So that focal point is something that just cannot get it together immediately with the other sextile planets, because it's not, it has no connection really, in a sense, and therefore it's a real learning process. But in a transit, it is, according to the research done in vibrational astrology, what has often been described in modern, as they put, astrology, and modern being traditional or whatever, but that would be that it's an adjustment. Somehow you have to make this adjustment. So what I'm getting at is, here you're working towards, you've got the sextile, you're thinking, okay, I've got a rebirth, I have a plan, or I've got an instinct, I'm going to work on it, or this sure fits in with my because I'm going around the clock here, with Jupiter, with my belief systems. But and it's going to do wounds, and I know I've got these sensitive points with me emotionally and etc. But the fact is, all these plans that you're making and trying to get down to the essential core, thinking of Saturn, is not in, it is really having difficulty adjusting to that rebirth. As far as the United States, you can see that whatever side of the fence you're on, you can see that the course that the politicians are making and people themselves are making, and however they're seeing it in support or not, are taking new adjustments, because life is changing. It's that Uranian suddenness. It's tricky. And it gets trickier. I know you're going to show us with the next couple of slides, I think.
Yes, we'll get into those yods a little bit more down the road here. So we're going to look at the Sabian symbol for Sedna, and that she's at 1 degree and 21 minutes. So we'll round it up to 2 degrees of Gemini. Santa Claus figuratively filling stockings hanging in front of the fireplace. So
Yeah. Is that furtively? Furtively. Is that like lots of action?
I think
Furtively,
so.
like few,
Yeah,
like busy, busy, busy.
furiously and fast, quick.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
And so this one, it's like, there is something to celebrate. There's it's a holiday, sharing presents. So people always are excited, especially children, to receive gifts. And the key word is innocence here. So do you want to share anything about the Sabian for Sedna?
What a fun Sabian. Really, it is most amazing. What stands out to me, Liz, is that line that you say down at the bottom that is coming from Edmund Jones in his mandala, which is really a great reference. The reception of new blessings from the spiritual realm, the above, the super consciousness, and that you must, to integrate that, it's really a matter of faith or trust and the purity of heart. And I say purity of heart, I recognize that element because there's many times in the past that are even present for me that I'm trusting that something will evolve. And I realize that it to get to that now moment is without the expectation or feelings of my own emotional, whatever it might be, just to have that purity of heart, like what is will be, let it be, so that it can be understood. Isn't that a beautiful way too? That understanding is like the stockings. It was so much fun as a kid, dive in there. I had an orange in the toe every year, but I loved it.
And just to be clear, the Sabian symbols that we're using today are from Dane Ruger's book, because you said Jones, and that's where they originated from, but this comes from Ruger's work.
So there's great hope that with that feeling of surrendering that has been brought up, or the collective, that by allowing.
So we're going to look at the aspects that Sedna is making in the summer solstice chart. Sedna is conjunct Uranus. So what would you say about that, Sue?
Oh, boy. Our path is just like my refrigerator breaking yesterday. It took me an entire day. I had to give away, but there was a lot of fun things about it, and I'm still thinking them over. For instance, a couple of that I'll mention. Of course, I had some different meatball chicken things from Costco. It's a big place here we go to on the island, and grateful for it because we are pretty remote. And they were cooked, but they needed to be eaten, and I can't eat all those. So I ran down to give them, and it turned out there was a worker. And he was so delighted, he took them. He was working on an office here. And his response was, I will go home and have my barbecue, because a lot of people barbecue, and invite all my neighbors. And I thought, oh, well, what a happy surprise. I was almost saying, me too. But I still had to find out what to do about my refrigerator. So it's those gifts, I think, that help you along the way that you don't expect. The other thing was I have this beautiful jar of Tasso. I love the jar. It's shaped. It's got little curves on the like old handles, like it's some ancient vessel. And it's from Greece, and it's olives, and they're stuffed with fun things like garlic. I think that's fun, and etc. I thought, and I misread it anyway. Empty it out. There's gifts. There's gifts in the surprises, but yet it's not a simple thing because I have this small refrigerator. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but it's part, I realize, one little step in many of redistributing my direction. It's as wacky as an agreement. Since you asked, I think we just have to keep trying to get past our resistance and the crisis. It can seem like a crisis. It is a crisis until one figures what the only thing that they can do to go forward.
Well, there's
so Mars,
a surprise on that path. And so it's like, we could say it's a detour, but maybe it's not a detour. Maybe it's just opening a new door, period.
Exactly. Because look at that conjunction that you asked me about, I'm so zeroed into. I suddenly realized it help from its friends. It's Mars doing a lot of action. It's like, and discerning, like the Virgo that you bring up. That's so important in these charts. And it's sextile in that connection with what is essential, beautiful Saturn helping in this regard. Saturn is such a helper, just like Virgo, when we open up to their virtues.
Well, and that Mars being square to it, before we got on the show, I know that you mentioned that a few items in the refrigerator were expired and you were unaware of that. So this
my miso, I love miso. Yes, go ahead.
Helped you clean out your refrigerator that needed to be purged anyway.
And didn't poison me, although I ate a big spoonful. I think partly because it has so much salt and I don't eat a lot of salt Sometimes I love that me so.
Right. And then we have a trine there off to Pluto. So, probably we're just going to use your refrigerator because that's a good example. But you're evaluating whether to fix the refrigerator you have or do you purchase a new one? And that's like a big decision. So you kind of
Oh,
take in
and
and work on that.
actually, this can work even further because if we are surrendering, like Santa Claus with the for the higher good, I was talking to a fellow astrologer briefly who for the show coming up with Astro Jam and I told her my sad story because I was sitting right outside about to go into Lowe's, and she said, well, maybe. I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, what you need is one of those college refrigerators. I'm like, oh gosh. And I walk in and they have always on the side there the dented, the problem, the returns. And I look around and there is the little refrigerator now hooked up in my house that had the upgraded college version, like I say, with a little refrigerator on top, the freezer, which really makes a difference if you're going to use one. You don't want one of those tiny little things. So it was a matter of surrendering with Pluto, I'm saying, for that rebirth.
And then we have a sextile to Saturn and Neptune. So Saturn is the boundaries and the rules and how's it going to work. And Neptune's like, okay, having a new vision. Anything else you'd like to say about those aspects?
And wait and see, keep going along. The story's not finished yet.
Okay, we're going to look at the Sabian symbol for Eris. Eris is at 25 degrees Aries, so we're going to look at the symbol for 26. A man possessed of more gifts than he can hold. Wow, that's pretty interesting. His
Yeah.
toolbox is full.
And the Santa Claus stocking is overflowing. Yes, isn't that obsession by potentiality? Well, sometimes I think that is perhaps appropriate for, let's say, either, come on, Sue, Jupiter, which is abundance and growth that we can see, and then Neptune, that is no boundaries, going as far as possible. But when you see the potentiality of anything, you can get like, oh boy, like a smorgasbord, just piling it up. Huh?
Well, and it can be useful to have many talents or gifts, but the warning here is about taking on more than you can take on. It's like, don't take on too much. So that would be kind of like the caution. Be careful what you agree to do.
You only have so much time. As Saturn reminds us. We have to.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there more to that? May I go back and just see that? That's
Sure.
such an exciting one. I know we've read these, but as life goes on, but I think it is, isn't it? There's limits and restrictions. So in other words, in a sense too, if you pile everything in, there's no room, which we've said again and again, whether it's this show or other shows, for that new seed to grow and to show the options. Or perhaps what Spirit, by trusting that there's going to be a hopeful answer, will provide. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I know for myself, it's like having my calendar and scheduling in some me time, whether that's to take a salt bath or a walk or whatever. It's like that's just as important as committing to doing other responsibilities too. So
That's greatest wisdom yet. Really.
and then the contacts with Eris is conjunct Chiron and the moon. And we've talked briefly about that. Do you want to say anything more about that conjunction?
I'm glad to see that really is illustrated there. I don't know if we've brought Mercury in so much, but we need to evaluate things. I mean, obviously, with Mars in Virgo, Mercury is doing work for that regard. But here, when Mercury is in Cancer, it's how are we protecting ourselves? Because there is that shell, the crab has the shell, and it's necessary because it's so vulnerable and nurturing and caring and compassionate that
I would say it's important to communicate what's going on, and that would help perhaps not feeling isolated, and also bring some healing or some resolution, but also to have the caution to not communicate in a chaotic, angry way.
And people are needing to communicate, aren't they? Yes, because of that square, it's going to be an action, and it's all related to the wounds and feeling excluded. And so, yes, it's, if we can, yep. But
Well,
then there is that strategist involved with
right. We got
Pallas up there.
textiles to Pallas Athena, using our strategy and wisdom with that. And, post COVID, I didn't realize that so many people are still isolating a lot. So that's a long time to be in isolation. And even for myself, we have a little newspaper that has little activities that are around the island in the next town. And so I try to go and do something that I've never done before, at least one time a month. And that's good.
Ah,
Not that I've been totally isolating, because I haven't, but I just feel that that's important for everybody to do that. And I've been going for walks on the beach, and then there's a lot of trails where I live. So now I'm going to start exploring the trails and going for walks on the trails. So
Liz, with the wonderful book, The Artist's Way, that for 50 years has really helped people. What you're saying is exactly what she says. You have to have me time because it's creative. It's where it just plays, and you get in touch with yourself. So making those dates unregulated or for caring is really valuable. There was something else you said though about this with Pallas Athena, about the strategy, and and now I guess it's lost.
well,
That's okay.
to me, it's kind of like, since it's in Aquarius, it's like maybe get out of your comfort and try something different. Now, one week I went to the farmer's market, and I don't go very often. I have been to the farmer's market before, but I don't go very often. So I went the first day it opened. But just trying things that maybe you wouldn't normally do, and it doesn't have to be one every day or anything, but even just
No,
a month, a little here and a little there, and I think that'll be very helpful.
it's very regenerative.
Okay, now we're going to look at the Sabian symbol for Neptune, and Neptune is at 2 degrees Aries, so we're going to look at Aries 3, the cameo profile of a man suggesting the shape of his country. And I always find this one kind of interesting.
Mm.
But it's very about transpersonal life and consciousness. So, and our identity, and I think our identity as a country, the United States, is changing big time, and we have different ideas of what that should be like. So that kind of reminds me of that, and how we can have the best life we could possibly have.
It's absolutely zeroed into what today is for the United States of America, which of course I know many might be listening elsewhere, but we're all increasingly listening to each other. It's just like having a dinner party, or not necessarily a dinner party, but a watch block or something, because we just as a nation experienced, as of the 26th, yesterday, our Jupiter return at 3 degrees 56 minutes of Cancer. And just prior to that, a few days, on the 23rd, was our Venus, Jupiter going to our Venus. So in other words, at first it was looking at all our values and whatnot, like this is, and our finances, but our resources and our security for us being self-reliant, and our relationships, everything that Venus involves. And then now we're going into our belief structure. What is our belief structure? And that beautifully is not just a set story ever. And that's where Cancer and Gemini, Mercury, come in so beautifully, because our emotions are attached to our story, and our thoughts, what we believe was a linear pattern, or what was impactful, and how we felt about it. And through dialogue and perhaps being objective, participating in a greater ability in life, not being so subjected. Oh, I know now what you were talking about was COVID. And it's really true, because it's much easier to tear down than to build up. Any sandcastle is a perfect illustration. Or take the Beavers Dam. You know, they build that dam and then people can come and just whop it right down. But it's that whole process. Or take the ruins over there in Europe. And I say Europe because, or any area where there's just a rubbles of rock from old buildings, maybe hundreds and thousands of years old. It takes a lot to reform the structures in the area. So reforming our stories right now is what we're doing. It's a Jupiter
rebuilding everything,
conquest. Yeah.
Okay, and we just did this one. So, and then we have the Sabian symbol for Pluto. Pluto's at 3 degrees and 20 minutes of Aquarius. So we're going to look at 4 Aquarius. A Hindu yogi demonstrates his healing powers. Wow, that's pretty magical that, you know, Pluto's on a degree of healing. So I love that, you know.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
Of spiritual energies, that's wonderful. So it's like going in and doing meditating or thinking or meditating and on a deep level and really evaluating what's going on in our lives on a personal level and a global level, I would say.
Super. That's so great. Making whole that with divine whole. Beautiful. Good, Liz.
Okay, so the aspects for the summer solstice chart, we mentioned earlier that we have yods and we have like 4 of them.
What a beautiful picture.
Right, because we talked
briefly about
the one that was pointing to Haumea. Then we have one pointing to Pluto, one pointing to Saturn and Neptune, and one pointing to Mars. So there's a lot of energy focusing on those planets that I mentioned. So there's like this huge energy on the Mars, Haumea, and Pluto, and Saturn, Neptune. And so the dwarf planets, the Neptune, the outer planets, and then one personal planet of Mars. So, and Mars is always I call it Mars an activator. Some people call Mars a trigger, but to me, I call Mars an activator.
Perfect word. Perfect word. Beautiful word. I love, that's how I see it.
Right. So I would just say that there's a lot of adjusting that is required to take place. And a lot of the planets that are the handles of these are focal points, except for the Sun, Jupiter, and Uranus, Sedna. So we have a lot of energy. So I would just say breathe, be careful, take your time, don't be in a hurry. There's a lot of changes and adjustments going to happen for this next 3 months. What would you say?
Absolutely. I'm remembering other astrologers, and essentially this is really entertaining everybody's viewpoints of what they see the world to be. You know, when you have Saturn and Neptune, your spiritual sense of what is essentially the ruling factors of life, along with the rebirthing and the activation of it. It's like you want your highway to be the highway. And when you compound that by how many, is it billions of people on the earth or millions? I'm not sure, but it's very common. It's like a petri dish that is just populated with, and it's also quantum. This is not a linear thing. Really, it is a matter of going down within and trying to find your own, how accurate, because possibly it's very good that the Sun and Jupiter are not at one of those apexes, because they're working with Mars. You're somehow working together to make that transformation and adjusting your philosophy as you need to.
Well, in those apex points, it's like Haumea's rebirth or birthing. Pluto is transformation and rebirth. Saturn is like a structure. Neptune is a vision, and Mars is like, let's get it done. So it's like, these new visions, this new structure, rebirth, and let go. Pluto can be letting go of things. So that's kind of summing all that up, all this energy.
Whenever there's been a real collective birth happening, recreation, transmutation, it seems as if the activation is kinetic. One feeds off the other and it powers here, and then that gets trampled on, and it's changing all the time. And the macro and the micro, it's from a distance, one can think, oh, this is happening. When you're submerged in it, I think it's almost like the wave of light, where suddenly all you see is what you're involved with. It isn't until you step out that again you see that, oh, that's the dynamics working. So all these Sabians we've been talking about, and what you've brought up with putting time aside to refocus for the inside, to digest it. Because again, on one path, there's a number of us that are very empathetic, and without knowing it, we've absorbed what other people are feeling. It's difficult to disengage from that. There's so much that, they talk about the aura, the boundaries that we have. But the remedy to just begin to experience your own personal life, what it is, which is emboldening our own flame, is so filled with necessity, and engaging with the world as we experience. Because as you say too, we're still perhaps not in the same, it's hard to compare it with pre-COVID. For many of us, we did move to a different location. Life has, in 5 years, made a huge bunch of changes, and it isn't comparable, but we can start experiencing out. Like, I know I'm volunteering now at the library, or trying to fit it in once a month, even to shelve their books for the sales. Ideally, I want to go to the Humane Society, that I did go to an orientation, so I'm ready to get on their calendar for activities, but I just haven't yet focused on it, because I feel like there's so many other things I want and need to get done. But I want to go and be around the animals, the cats and the dogs, because that's part of life. Anyway, on and on.
So we have a Thor's hammer, and we have Saturn, Neptune square to that sun and Jupiter, and they're pointing to Juno, and Juno's about our relationships, our commitments, our oaths. And so I would just say that those are going through a big change too. Whether doesn't mean that, relationships will fall away. It possibly could, but you could just be renewing your commitments to your relationships that mean a lot to you too. So there's adjustments here in this chart for the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. There is a lot of adjustments and change that will take place in the next 3 months. Do you want to say anything more about this Thor's hammer?
Well, I always appreciate you bringing the fact that it is Juno of our commitments. It is fascinating to realize that push come to shove, that's what's being driven, because the Thor's just pushes that. So it's all going to be relating back somehow to relationship, which eventually gets back to ourselves. So yes, quite the story.
And Juno's retrograde, so reconsidering the relationships and oaths that we've made, and how are we going
And
to
Scorpio. It's
right.
It's in, but I like having Saturn there so much to remind us, is this essential? We can care about something, but
is it worth the effort?
Or how much time should we devote to it? Like you were saying, we can always change the ratio of activity or something, not necessarily eliminate it, but put it in a different perspective.
Right, because as life changes, sometimes we have more time or less time or other responsibilities. So Saturn would be time and responsibilities. And Neptune's like, yes, we can have, huge dreams, but how do we make it real?
Yeah. What a wonderful solstice that's still lingering on as we plow through.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to thank Sue for joining me today. I want to thank our audience for joining today and those that come back and watch at a future time. So is there any last thoughts that you want to share with people?
I thank you, Liz. I think that looking at from the standpoint of dwarfs, that ultimately are working on a transpersonal basis involving the larger scope. But Mars, so important to say that we have a place in it. We have many choices in fielding time for ourselves to weather this. Our intentions can be of the best. So there's a lot of dreams and hopes.
Okay, and then here's our references: Dwarf Planet University, Alan Clay's books, Philip Sedgwick, Linda Berry, Astro.com, and Pam Gregory. And here's Sue's slide, and I'll let her tell you about it.
Thank you, Liz. In a couple of weeks, you and I are always with the new moon. And then there's others. I think this next week is going to be Astro Jam, which is actually looking at in a more of an online astro drama personifications. It's more fun time. But I thank you for joining with that.
And there's a lot of interesting shows that I do, so there's a lot to choose from. Come back and enjoy other episodes with other astrologers. And thanks for supporting. I will be on Talk Cosmos with Sue on July 20th, talking about the Leo new moon and how the leadership is being revamped. And I do consultations. I have a newsletter and a YouTube channel. So if you want to contact me for any of that, or sign up for my newsletter, or sign up for my YouTube channel, please do. I want to thank my sponsor, Peregrine, Astro Peregrine software. It's an astrology software for Mac and Windows. And there's a coupon code, and you can book a free demo if you like. And again, I want to thank Sue for being here and everybody that joined. And we're going to say goodbye for now.
Good night and goodbye and good morning. Thank you, Liz.